Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Book Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, we're in an odd situation. We're still not clear where we are with these Ukraine peace plans. So, everyone remembers we had the 28-point plan. We talked about it at length last week, and then we had the meetings in Geneva between the Ukrainians and Marco Rubio, and that's been whittled down to this 19-point plan. But we don't really know what's in the 19-point plan. And we do know that that 19-point plan has now been handed over to the Russians, but the Russians haven't said anything about this 19-point plan other than that they've received it. And so we really don't know where we are with this. Now, the Telegraph of London has just published, kind of a hair on fire piece that apparently the 19-point plan, is still a Putin wish list. And this is, absolutely shock, horror, terror. Here is this Telegraph from today. This only was appeared really just a couple of hours ago. And and here it says here, Trump hands Putin's Trump hands Putin Ukraine's occupied territory. So apparently Trump just hands it over. Here, it's yours. Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. That'll do nicely. The United States is poised to recognize Russia's control of the Crimea and other occupied Ukraine territories to secure a deal to end the war. The Telegraph understands that Donald Trump has sent his peace envoy, Steve Witkoff, and son-in-law Jared Kushner to make the direct offer to Vladimir Putin in Moscow. The plan to recognize territory which breaks U.S. diplomatic convention is likely to go ahead despite concerns among Ukraine's European allies.
What is this U.S. diplomatic convention?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Is it spelled Kosovo?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. They always like to say this. It's like the rules-based order.
Yeah, we adhere to the rules. Nobody else. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Well, but also that somehow, well, we never violate borders. We never.
Well, the Golan Heights,
Yeah, exactly. But it's very nice.
Cyprus.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, it's very nice to say this about yourself. Oh, well, of course, we would never countenance change in borders. No, we would never countenance unilateral change in borders. No, that's absolutely shocking. That's not who we are. So that's
You play that role really well, George. You say it's such a European. I like that.
that's
Yeah.
right, exactly. So now this is the Telegraph, which is always the most hysterical and the most hawkish of of the Western media. But it's very interesting because, as we'll see, much of the media coverage over the past few days has been a kind of a relief. Phew,
Yes. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
dodged a bullet last week with those 28 points, and then we Europeans, we managed to get in our 2 bits worth in Geneva, and Marco Rubio came. He made us all feel good about ourselves, and all those horrible people, those Steve Witkoffs, they've been given their marching orders. So that's been the thrust of the media coverage over the past few days. And so this is suddenly, uh, you know, clearly, hey, we were celebrating a little too soon. And in fact, it's even clear that they were celebrating too soon because, when Putin was speaking yesterday in Kyrgyzstan, he wasn't really saying, well, whatever you've got, we're not going to accept anything that was cobbled together, the 19 points. He didn't seem to think that any major changes have been made to the original plan. Well, we don't know, but
And
he wasn't
just
he wasn't saying, what you got, I'm not interested.
Just to accent what George is saying, which I think is really on point, is that what we've seen over the last week, everyone, is Western reaction to a Western plan,
Right.
and the everyone chiming in, from Merz and Macron, Stammer, and of course Zelensky. This was all an intra
Yeah,
conversation.
exactly. Exactly.
And so for 1 week, we've been subject to that. And George is absolutely right. The Russians have it now, and they say, well, we'll take a look at it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
I mean, think of this last week of just, roller coaster up and down. It was all junk, actually.
Yeah,
Okay. And it was intended to be. It was
yeah,
all about emotions.
yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So as things stand, from apparently from what Trump said, that Witkoff will be heading to Moscow next week to meet with Putin. Putin also confirmed that Witkoff would be in Moscow next week, and Jared Kushner may or may not be
Well,
along.
before you go on, George, and maybe I'm preempting you, but I would like to ask you a question. There's a dynamic going on here. Is Rubio and Witkoff,
Right.
okay? And I think those are broad rubrics,
Yes.
okay? Now, initially we have Kushner and we have Jared Kushner and we have Steve Witkoff spearheading this. And George and I, pointed it out. Marco Rubio isn't there. Then Rubio
Right.
swoops in.
Swooped in over
Okay.
the weekend.
And
Yeah.
and, and so the question is, not having the 19 points in front of us right now, is this dynamic shifting again? Is that, well, Marco Rubio is Secretary of State National Security Advisor, but this is from the president, his
Right.
plan, and it's
Right.
being presented to the Russians. There's a lot of ambiguity in there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It really is very difficult to know
Yeah.
how it's being played, because you could also say, hey, they sent Rubio to soothe the fears of the Europeans, but that wasn't really very important. What was important is what the president wants, and says, okay, well, hey, all these Europeans, they're wringing their hands. I'll send Marco Rubio, and he will calm them down a little bit. That doesn't mean that somehow, well, now, oh, well, this is the final plan, whatever
Well, no,
Rubio and the
because
Europeans have agreed upon.
I don't know. I don't know anything about the temperament of Steve Witkoff, but these guys have huge egos. They're very rich
Right.
people,
Very
and
rich.
if you're an envoy for the president of the United States, that is something. But if you're an errand boy for Marco Rubio, that is something very different. I have a hard time believing that Steve Witkoff is going to pitch Marco
I
Rubio's plan.
I I don't believe it either. I I,
Okay.
I don't believe it either. And
I think Whitcup would say, but piss up a rope. I'm not doing that. That's yours.
that's right. That's right. Um, so then the Telegraph goes on. One well-placed source said, "It's increasingly clear the Americans don't care about the European position." Well, I think that does seem to be right.
Yeah. And it's
Um,
not recent.
Yes,
Okay.
they say the Europeans can do whatever they want. Yeah, I get that feeling too. I'm getting quite a strong feeling that that's what they're saying. Hey, if you want this war, you want to continue this war, then go ahead, continue this war, but it's not with us. That's kind of what they're saying to the Europeans. The Europeans know they ultimately cannot continue this war without the Americans. I mean that's the point. I mean all the talk, oh, nothing about Europe without Europe, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, all this talk, but ultimately they can't do anything without the Americans. Um, Russia's president on Thursday said Washington's legal recognition of Crimea and the Donetsk and Lugansk regions as Russian territory would be one of the key issues in negotiations over the U.S. president's peace plan. And the Kremlin on Friday said it had received a revised strategy for ending the war, drawn up after emergency talks between Ukrainian and American officials in Geneva. An initial 28-point peace plan formulated by Mr. Witkoff after discussion with Russian officials offered America's de facto recognition of Crimea and the two eastern Donbass regions. The strategy also proposed de facto recognition of Russian-held land behind the line of contact in Ukraine's Kherson and Zaporozhye regions after any ceasefire agreement. And then in Geneva, Ukrainian and US officials negotiated a new 19-point plan, which is less favorable to Moscow. But multiple sources have suggested that American offers of recognition have remained as part of the strategy. Kiev would not be forced to recognize Russia's control over the territories it has illegally annexed since 2014. The Ukrainian constitution prevents any president or government from ceding territory without first posing the question to voters in a nationwide referendum. And then we have Yermak and Umerov were expected to fly to Florida to meet U.S. officials at Mr. Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort this weekend.
Interesting. He doesn't want to talk to
He
Zelensky.
doesn't want to talk to Zelensky. It's never a good sign if you're being summoned to talk to the U.S. president at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, it's just it's
Yeah, it doesn't have the same kind of veneer as the White House, does it?
yeah, exactly. And over the weekend, so he's kind of this is the Thanksgiving weekend, so he's going to carve
Yeah.
out half an hour for you.
Yeah, and there's a mini bar. Take advantage of it, guys. Okay, go ahead.
But it's a cash bar, so
It's a cash bar.
it's
Yeah,
not it's
yeah.
not on the house.
Well, I can give you discount tokens, but we can talk. Okay.
Yeah. But now this is the New York Times. The New York Times has a big piece today about how the Europeans managed to insert themselves into the negotiations. This is the really So we have the Telegraph saying, "Hey, I don't think anything has changed," and as I say, you kind of got that impression from Putin's news conference yesterday in Kyrgyzstan that really nothing much has changed, but. All these stories have been ready to go, saying, "Oh, yeah, we managed to thwart those big bad Trump Witkoff plans." So how Europe lost its voice on Ukraine, then tried to get it back. European leaders were blindsided by President Trump's 28-point plan to end the Ukraine war, setting off a dash for influence. And then when Chancellor Friedrich Merz of Germany first learned of the Trump administration's peace plan for Ukraine last Thursday, he was stunned by both the content and the way he found out. He found out, no one told him yet. He had to find out about it in reading newspapers. Instead of hearing it from American officials, Mr. Merz learned about the plan from a news headline. His team had to reach out several times to set up a call on Friday night with President Trump for an explanation. So he's putting in these calls.
Why is he owed an explanation?
That's a very good question. Why is he? This is the thing about the Europeans. They always, arrogate to themselves that they owed something.
Where is the European peace plan? Okay, George and I ad nauseum have talked about the 28 points. We have some differences of opinion on it, but nonetheless, it is a plan.
Exactly.
It's a plan.
Right.
I'm very dismissive of the Gaza plan, but it's a plan.
It's a plan.
Okay,
Exactly.
and it's something you can talk about. Mertz, where's your 20 points?
That's exactly right.
You schmuck, you don't deserve an explanation.
That's exactly the point. And all this time, first Macron and Sergeant Schultz, Rishi Sunak and Starmer, you've had changes of governments, and not one of them has ever come up with a peace plan. Not one, no, not a single one of them came up with a peace plan. So, and, we know that the reason they haven't come up with a peace plan, they want to keep this war going.
Don't want peace.
They don't want peace. They want to keep it going. Well, Trump has kind of figured this out. You just want to keep this war going. So what's the point of asking your view? I know what your view is. I mean, if you know what somebody's view is, then you don't have to bother asking. So yeah, you want to keep this war going. I don't. So why do I need to consult you? But you're right. So we're owed something. That we owed something. What's the basis of this obligation? And and said senior European officials have known the Trump administration was working on some kind of a plan. So something funny. They knew they were doing something. Said, "What are you doing? Nothing." So,
Close your laptop. I'm doing
yeah,
nothing.
so what was that? Nothing. Um, but nothing that favored Russia to this extent.
Again, there's another. See, this isn't more distraction and deflection. What is so favorable about George and I went through those points.
Right.
There's, I don't see that it's particularly
No,
favorable to Russia at
I don't think so
all.
at all. I
Okay?
don't think so at all. There's an awful lot there that is unacceptable. I mean, even the notion of a de facto is a very dubious one. I mean, when does de facto just end? When Trump
Yes,
leaves, then
exactly.
say, "Hey, we've abandoned. We never accepted this. It was Trump. Trump may have done, but now we have a new administration. We don't accept it."
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so there's an awful lot there, and the use of Russia's frozen assets and so on, and that security guarantee, which was left somewhat vague what it actually means. So there's an awful lot there that what the Russians would find unacceptable. So that's why it's so bizarre to say, "Oh, it favored Russia."
And those of you that have watched the podcast, George and I had some pretty strong difference of opinion
Right.
on some things, but I think George and I were in complete agreement, full-throatedly, is that it's a good basis to continue talking.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a framework for discussion. Um, when it surfaced, they realized that Europe had been cut out of the Trump administration's efforts to end the continent's biggest land war since World War II. So they suddenly realized that Europe had
Suddenly
been cut out.
realize, oh my God, they
They've
suddenly
been cut out.
realize, oh my God, four souls.
See, you tend to get cut out when you don't really matter.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you just don't matter. So you get cut out. I mean, you're only included if you matter. If your view matters, then you're
could you
included.
imagine, Witkoff says to Trump, says, okay, Mr. President, I have the 28 points for your review. He said, should I call the Europeans? And Trump, nah.
Um, and then says, in the days since the plan was leaked, European leaders, including Mr. Merz, have worked frantically to reverse the slide using
Reverse the slide. It's a proposal. Nothing is sliding. Nobody's agreed to anything yet. Nobody's sliding.
that's right, using persuasion and behind the scenes maneuvering to nudge Mr. Trump's administration towards a more acceptable position. Acceptable,
Persuasion from a guy that has the charisma of a cereal box. Great.
yeah, 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 that's right. Plans were upended, frenzied huddles arranged. Oh, I
What
like the
plans
phrase.
were upended? What plans were upended?
Well,
Oh,
they
Steve.
were in Johannesburg. They went to that G20
Oh,
meeting in Johannesburg. So they were planning to talk about, all the things that you talk about, are these things, green energy, climate change, sustainability, the usual rubbish. Um, and so they said, well, we can't talk about that. We need to talk about Ukraine. Frenzied huddles. I like the frenzied.
Trump's schedule is determined by the European predilections, right?
That's exactly.
That's what
Exactly.
it sounds like. Yeah.
Yes. Frenzied huddles arranged. Several envoys took the first possible flight from Johannesburg, where they were meeting counterparts from the G20 to Geneva to try to persuade US officials to change course. So they were planning on going on a safari. I mean, when you go to South Africa, I mean, how often do you go there? So their safari plans were upended. So, um, and then it says that huge diplomatic effort mounted across major European countries and institutions meant that by Sunday evening, Europe's leaders had managed to forestall some of what they saw as the worst excesses of the Trump plan for Ukraine. um, but we talked about this. It's still not clear really what they accomplished in Geneva, because in Geneva, as far as we can see, Rubio met the Ukrainians, and then there was these national security advisors. He had a meeting with them, but so they managed to forestall. I think they're just kind of deluding themselves.
Yeah.
And then
Marco sitting.
exactly. The leaked proposal, reported in outlets like Axios and the Financial Times, floored them. It suggested that NATO would be prevented from stationing troops in post-war Ukraine.
That floored you? Oh, really? I guess you haven't been paying attention. Okay.
Yeah, you're planning on that. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds like you have a serious peace plan in the works. You were planning on NATO forces being stationed in Ukraine. You see, that's what I mean. I mean, since anyone with any common sense would know this is absolutely, totally unacceptable to Russia. That's your proposal, which means that there's not going to be any peace deals.
Yeah, this isn't this mindset is a new spin on the Minsk process.
Yes,
Okay. Exactly.
yes, right. Scuppering a French and British proposal to send peacekeepers there.
That floored them. My goodness.
Send peacekeepers. No, scuppering a British proposal to send NATO troops there to train the Ukrainians. They
It,
call them peacekeepers, but they're not. The last thing they're doing is keeping the peace.
and,
They're
and it
preparing for war.
and it floored them.
It
Yeah.
floored them. It included a plan to unfreeze billions of dollars of Russian funds now held largely in Belgium, which many in Europe hope to loan to Ukraine. I always say
Here we go. Look at this here. A plan to unfreeze that. Oh, they're just unfreezing them,
that's right.
George. They're
Exactly.
just unfreezing. It's harmless. It's just unfreezing them. They're
Exactly.
cold.
It's
We're
always
going
good.
to warm them up. We're going to
That's
take
right.
them out of the
Exactly. Take it
freezer.
out of the freezer and
This
warm
is
it up.
such dishonesty in journalism.
It is. You're absolutely right. Because unfreeze, you say, well, that sounds good. I mean, who wants anything to be frozen? But also they say, hope to loan to Ukraine. It's not a loan. It's not a loan. I mean, you basically you're going to give this to Ukraine. You can't just loan this money because essentially they're going to use this as a security, as collateral. And then when Ukraine doesn't pay the money back, like how's it going to pay the money back? The collateral's gone. That's why Belgium is saying no, absolutely not, because they know, well, this isn't a loan. I mean, it's basically you're just handing it over. A loan, but they come up with, oh yeah, it's a loan. I mean, it's a loan. Absolutely is going to be paid back. Um, in Germany, Mr. Merz canceled a scheduled appearance at a reading event at an elementary school to deal with the fallout. The chancellor's team wondered if Mr. Trump had known about the plan and if he was ready to be taken seriously. Well, I would have thought he'd know about it. I mean, I kind of assume he would know about it.
Boy, this guy this is like the IQ of a geranium. Okay, jeez.
He
So
really is. He's a really
aware
dumb
of,
guy.
he's calling it the Trump plan, and he's going to be the chairman of peace of the Trump plan. I wonder if he's aware of it. Well,
Oh
go
no,
ahead.
yeah, exactly. No, yeah, he's not, not aware of it. Yeah. By Friday, Mr. Trump and his administration had begun to talk to their European counterparts, and it became increasingly clear that the plan was real. Who'd have thunk? Daniel P. Driscoll, U.S. Army Secretary, said at a meeting on Friday in Ukraine that European countries were left out of negotiations to avoid having too many cooks. Officials said, Mr. Driscoll said European officials had grown too close to Ukrainian counterparts to objectively assess the war.
Well, there's no lies detected
No
there.
lies detected. Quite. Um, it's a very interesting. The replacement of Kellogg by Driscoll that's a significant shift. I mean
Yeah.
that's where personnel really matters.
And this is J.D. Vance's boy,
Yeah,
everyone.
right, right. Kellogg was just awful. He was a complete impediment to anything.
I think he already has received Ukrainian citizenship, so.
Now came the dilemma. Should Europe and Ukraine reject the proposal out of hand, angering Mr. Trump and losing any control over its trajectory? Or should they risk giving it momentum by trying to correct its course? And then Zelensky made his speech. Ukraine may soon face an extremely difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner. Ukraine has no dignity. I mean, if you live off others, you have no dignity. I mean, that's been a
As I keep reminding everyone, when you have this melodramatic language here,
mm,
they volunteered for this project.
right.
Okay? They volunteered. Zelensky and his circle have been very well compensated for their participation in one of George's favorite words, this caper.
Yeah, that's right. Um, by the time European prime ministers and presidents gathered on Saturday at the G20 summit in South Africa, they were collectively reaching a pragmatic, if unpalatable, conclusion.
Well,
It would,
wow, I'm waiting here with bated breath, George. Pragmatic, but unpalatable. Okay.
it's always interesting whenever you read these New York Times kind of articles written at leisure is the vocabulary. They had time to come up with all these words like unpalatable, scuppered. This is, it's a leisurely article. It's one of these think pieces, reflecting on
Yep.
recent events.
Yeah, but it's also very seductive, okay?
Yep,
Because if you look at the kind of New York Times reader, okay, a very peculiar group of people, by the way, who would pay money for it. But anyway, when you eat a scuppered, unpalatable, this is a seduction to your sense of being,
yep,
and because the style is of upper crust value, the ideas that are communicated using this language would appear to be of equal value.
right.
No, this is a sham.
Yeah, yeah,
This is
good. Yeah,
this is using $5 words to
yeah,
say
right.
junk.
That's right. Exactly. That's absolutely right. Um, yeah, because these types of articles, they always do this long, kind of reflective,
Oh,
on
yeah.
recent history, and people, exactly, people sitting there in New York on the Upper West Side, reading this. This is a long think piece, boy, this is history in the making, and then using all these big words, the $5 words. Um,
And it makes you feel like you're a participant in all
yes,
of.
that's
Okay.
right. Yeah. If Europe's leaders wanted to regain a seat at the table, according to four officials familiar with the discussions, they needed to engage and to speak with one voice.
So if we go back here, so let's this unpack that sentence. Is it because they were not engaged that they didn't get a seat at the table? Is this what the author is trying to tell us?
I think what he's saying is they have to go along with
Yeah, right.
Trump.
Yeah,
They have to
yeah.
keep Trump happy.
Humble pie. It's called humble pie.
Exactly. They can't just simply say, hey, we don't want to have anything to do with it. Because if they do say we don't want to have anything to do with it, Trump
But
will say,
fine,
okay,
fine,
fine, bye
fine,
bye,
fine.
you're good. So I mean, that's in a way that's the threat. It's like the threat to resign. You don't want to threaten to resign because they just might accept your resignation. So they say, oh, well, we don't want to have anything to do with this plan. Okay. So they say, oh, we engage. Include us in. We've got something to contribute. Um, and then so sitting in a semicircle of beige armchairs, arrayed
Oh,
under
what is this, Timothy Garton-Ash?
exactly it is Timothy Garton, beige armchairs. Was he beige? I'm not sure. It doesn't look beige to me. Beige armchairs, arrayed under glaring white lights. The leaders began to coalesce around a set of principles.
See, again, this kind of language here is that you're there, you're
Yes,
actually in
that's
the
right.
room.
But here's a pic.
This is the seduction of
That's
this.
right. And here's a picture, just in case, let's look at the picture. There they are. The beige, is that beige? Look, it looks beige.
That's not my beige. Beige is more brownish for me.
Is it? Yeah, beige is one of those colors I'm never exactly sure. What, I
Well,
mean,
see, I would have said dirty blonde.
that's what
Okay.
I always think of beige as dirty blonde. I always think it's just off-white. Uh,
Yeah, off-white, dirty blonde. We're in the
Off-white, but that
same.
looks more grayish.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it
gray,
kind of
greenish.
it suits their demeanor.
That's right. But that if you look at the closeness, you look closely at their faces. I mean, it's a little hard to see. They all look very glum. Um,
Yeah,
and
it looks like they've had a bout of diarrhea in South Africa.
exactly, they look glum. Even von der Leyen, who usually has that smug little smirk on her face, yeah, she's not smirking.
Yeah, but
Doesn't look happy.
but she doesn't. She's not fit for purpose because she doesn't even fit in the chair. Look at
Well,
that.
she doesn't fit the chair. But again, it's so here they are. Whatever you think of Macron, Starmer, and Merz, I mean, at least they ran for office. They stood in an election. But why in the middle of this are these two people who have no business being there? I mean, what is Ursula von der Leyen doing there? She's completely unelected, and this guy, the president of the Costa, the president of the European Council, he also has no business being there. Why are they sitting there, like right in the center, as if they're the people who matter?
I think there should be two more chairs there, and we should be there.
Yeah,
But I wouldn't call it beige. Okay.
I wouldn't call it beige. Yeah, no, I think if I knew how to do AI, then I'd love to set up a picture like that, and with the two of us sitting right in the middle.
I could be, and I'd be holding Apple. Okay.
That's right. Yes, and smiling instead of glum.
No, no, you and I would be smiling.
That's right, exactly. Anyway, going back, it says these principles were borders should not be changed by force. There could not be major limitations on Ukraine's armed forces, and decisions that affected Europe and NATO should be made with their involvement. All ideas that ran counter to the Trump plan. So that's the principles they decided to enunciate.
Okay, these are they speaking again? There's blurred lines here. Is this the EU? EU is saying that no country can limit the armed forces. What's their standing to make that
Well, it's
claim?
very unclear, you see, because it's not quite EU, Europe, and of course Starmer
Well,
is there.
no one's asking the Europeans. The document that is in circulation doesn't have a line EU sign here. Okay, so what standing do they
No, they don't
have?
have standing. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, what is the standing of the EU? Why is von der Leyen there? I mean, what's her standing here? Um, but it should not be made. Should be made with their involvement.
Well, you said you're non-combatant, so I mean, again, what's your standing? Why are you
Right.
here?
That's right. That's right. Um, and instead of setting themselves in opposition to Mr. Trump, the Europeans decided to flatter him. For all their qualms about the plan, the leaders released a statement that suggested it could be a starting point.
Well, nice to know. I mean,
Yes. We welcome the continued U.S. effort to bring peace to Ukraine. We believe, therefore, that the draft is a basis which will require additional work. So
yeah, well,
additional work, in other words, we're going to rewrite it.
yeah, yeah.
And that's the additional work. And then as Sunday dawned in Switzerland, so this is the lyrical, there's some Hemingway-like character sort of writing this. Sunday dawned in Switzerland. This is, dawning, light is beautiful, beautiful country. You see the sun over the mountains. You think, wow, this is skiing weather. Sunday dawned in Switzerland. Europe remained on the edge and on the outside.
Can you see Europe on the edge? Can you
It's on the edge.
can you visualize on the edge in
Yeah,
Switzerland?
it's exactly on the edge. Here, there's a ski slopes.
Yeah, or maybe they're sitting um, totally dejected on some balcony overlooking a slope. Who knows? Thinking dark thoughts.
That's right. Several European officials gathered at the German mission where they waited to meet Mr. Rubio's team. They talked with their Ukrainian counterparts. They strategized.
Oh yeah, they plotted.
It paid off. Late in the day, the Americans finally met with them. Well, that's late in the day. I mean, so that sounds like they were cooling their heels all day. Um, so because Sunday dawned in Switzerland, so that sounds early in the morning. And then late in the day, the Americans finally met with them. That closer contact, along with pressure from the Ukrainians, brought a small breakthrough. Mr. Rubio told the Europeans privately that issues that directly affected European nations would no longer be included in the current discussions. And so I don't understand exactly
That is,
what that means. I mean, it's
I
like,
have no idea. That is so broad and so ambiguous.
right. They said,
And
oh, this is
one of the
some,
things, and if you look at the language, I mean, everything is that's one of my criticisms of everything is interwoven with other things. That there's,
right,
when you talk about the United States, NATO, and Ukraine and Russia, I mean, the
right,
United States is in NATO, and then talking about Europe and NATO,
right. Yeah, yeah, that's right. That directly affected. But what about indirectly
yeah,
affected?
what
So
about, good point, George. What about indirectly? Yeah.
yes, would no longer be included in the current discussions. And then by the time Mr. Rubio briefed reporters on Sunday evening, there had been a clear change in tone. Mr. Rubio made good on the promise he made in private, painted the talks as constructive, and the plan is open to change. This is a living, breathing document. We talked about that on Monday, indicating that Europe would have a say in the parts that concern European nations and that those discussions would proceed along a separate track.
So I said,
And then by Monday morning, Germany's foreign.
what is it going to be an agreement between the United States and Europe? Separate? I
I
don't know.
don't exactly what's a separate track. I think it's okay. Well, we'll talk about that on a separate track. And then by Monday morning, Germany's foreign minister Stefan Wadefuhl was describing the talks as a European win. I still don't get the win. I just don't quite see what they've
Well, it's one
won.
of these things too, George, is that when you're in this kind of delusional thinking, you can accept something that's a win in your head.
Right.
It's not really by any definition a win,
No,
but but this is a psychological condition. We got to win, and then
right.
you just convince yourself.
That's right. That's right. And then, so that was the New York Times, but Politico also had something along this line. Says Rubio changes the tack of Trump's Ukraine negotiations after a week of chaos. And then Rubio's arrival in Geneva on Sunday to join Driscoll and resume discussions with senior Ukraine officials changed the tenor of the conversations. The Trump administration team backed away from a firm Thursday deadline and, in the opinion of Europeans and Ukrainians, started taking their positions more into consideration. So that's what I mean. Well, this is a big win. They're taking their views into consideration, but it's not none of this is at all clear that anyone is taking anything the Europeans are
You
saying
can't
into
take any of
consideration. Why would they?
you can't take any of this to the bank, folks.
I don't think so. And then here, the head spinning and chaotic past week of U.S. diplomacy has made plain two truths about Rubio's role in the administration. First, foreign and congressional interlocutors regard him as a cleanup hand on the Russia Ukraine file, coming in to restore order and realign Washington with its allies and partners rather than Moscow.
Other than the mouse. Well, yeah, Politico, but is it going to get what Trump wants? See, Politico, you don't ask that question.
Well, that's it. But it's also very interesting because Rubio is the national security advisor. But the fact is that Trump relies on Steve Witkoff to handle negotiations for him.
There you go. That's the very beginning of our conversation.
That's right, because the thing about when Kissinger was Nixon's national security advisor and Secretary of State, he relied on Kissinger to conduct negotiations on his behalf. So crisis in the Middle East, the Yom Kippur War, he sent Kissinger to talk to the Russians. He sent him to Moscow. But he's not. But Trump isn't doing that. Trump isn't sending Rubio to carry out these negotiations. It's Witkoff. It was Witkoff in the Middle East, and it's Witkoff on Ukraine.
George, I see a train wreck on the horizon here.
Right.
Seriously.
Right. Yeah. Um,
Mike
and
Waltz, Mike Waltz, look what happened to him.
yes, that's right. Yes. It's very strange. We never really hear much about Waltz. I mean,
Well, and that's good.
That's a good thing.
And that's a good thing.
Before Rubio showed up in Switzerland, that's quite a come down. You know, you were the national security advisor, and now you're just sitting there at the UN lifting your hand. I mean, it's just, um,
I'm sure that it's a nice apartment is
oh yeah, yeah, and it's cocktail parties, and it's very nice. You know, you're going to excellent New York restaurants. You know, so it's a nice life. Um, Before Rubio showed up in Switzerland, it largely felt like Vice President J.D. Vance, via his close friend Driscoll, was leading the process. By the end of the weekend, Rubio had taken the reins because the conversations became more flexible.
Okay, if this is what you're selling, I'm not buying.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I'm
I
not
really don't.
buying. You
I
you
don't.
can say that, I guess, but
That's just so I said. Well, the flexibility. Well, so far the only flexibility we've heard is also they dropped the Thanksgiving deadline, but I haven't seen anything. I mean, it's like um and so and I think it's striking that we haven't seen the 19-point plan. I mean that's it's very
yeah, well,
interesting.
George is right. Everything else is leaked.
Yes, exactly. This hasn't been leaked. It's very quite remarkable. Still, Rubio was also joined in Switzerland on Sunday by Deputy National Security Advisor Andy Baker, who is close aide to Vance, Special Envoy Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, who have shown a certain degree of independence, to put it mildly, the European official said. Even as Rubio has taken the lead, they have continued to advocate positions that European and Ukrainian officials see as out of line with Rubio's approach. Who cares about Rubio's approach? I mean, Rubio does not, is not in charge of the administration. Rubio, like all the others, they serve at the president's pleasure. So,
Well,
they're not following
yeah,
Rubio's line. It doesn't matter. They don't have to follow Rubio's line.
and I'm sure the lines of communication that include Trump, Witkoff, and Kushner are very, very open and very accessible.
Right.
Okay, because like I said, Witkoff, whatever you think of his diplomatic abilities, that's for another time to talk about. But he has Trump's ear, and
That's the
certainly Kushner does.
Kushner. Exactly.
And, and, and
That's the key.
Rubio is ideologically an outsider.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. Always has been. Um, and so, but Witkoff, if you enjoy the trust of the president, whether if you're somebody like Harry Hopkins with FDR or Colonel House with
House.
Wilson, that's it. That's what matters. The president then delegates all kinds of sensitive missions for you. Doesn't matter Rubio is presides over the State Department. I mean, the State Department does you know, it does diplomacy. That's the function of the State Department. It doesn't mean you do policy.
The importance and the effectiveness of a Secretary of State is 100% determined by what the
Yeah,
president wants.
right,
Okay. Secretary of State, yeah, it's an administrative job
right,
of pursuing the White House's foreign policy aims. That's all it really is.
right, right.
Okay. Yeah, it's really all because of Henry Kissinger
Well,
that we
Kissinger, that's
have.
right. But if you look back on previous presidents, all right, there was a fight between Brzezinski and Vance, but basically it was Carter came to rely on Brzezinski. I mean, Brzezinski was a very firm, very aggressive figure, so he came to rely on Brzezinski. Now, Alexander Haig was the Secretary of State to Reagan, and Alexander Haig decided to run his own foreign policy. Well, when you do that, when you decide to run your own foreign policy, you're shown the door very quickly. That's just what happened with Haig, and that's always the key. As you said, it depends on the president. You have to keep in with the president. You have to ensure that the president's wishes are implemented. If you go off and start doing your own thing, then you're out very quickly. Um,
And just to top it off, Witkoff is not going to be consulting with Rubio when he's in Moscow. I can guarantee you that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. That's right. Um, and yeah, and then Rubio's participation in the talks produced much more American flexibility. The four people familiar with the discussion said, you get the sense, they're just sort of deluding themselves.
I
They had a nice,
agree. I agree. I
yeah,
agree.
they have this nice
Well,
conversation.
he listened to us. He listened
Yeah,
to us.
exactly. He had a nice
That's our
con
victory. We won because he's listening to us.
Yeah,
That's
and he's very nice. He's kind of very smooth, and I'm sure he made them feel important. He, you know,
because it made him feel important.
exactly. And oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. He always listen. Always flexible. He's flexible. He's coming around to our way of thinking. Rubio told reporters on Sunday that the aim is simply to finalize discussions as soon as possible, rather than by Thanksgiving. That's so. As we look around, and then we started off with looking at the story in the Telegraph. It doesn't sound like anything much has changed. We could be wrong. We'll see. But you know, just as after Anchorage, the Europeans were really happy. That's it. We've managed to get Trump on board. Now we can go back to issuing another round of sanctions, blustering about Putin, talking about Russian disinformation, hybrid war. Everything is happy. And then they're caught flat footed. Hey, we didn't know Trump was still engaged with the Russians. I thought he told us that he wasn't going to do that. Well, he didn't actually tell you that. So they're caught by surprise. Now it looks to me as if they're going to be caught by surprise again, thinking that, oh, everything is now settled and we don't have to worry anymore.
Yeah, and everybody just take a step back and take a breath. Again, we don't know that what these 19 points are. Obviously, there have been deletions. Some of them easily could have been deleted for me. Okay, like Russia will be part of G8. Okay, I hope that's been deleted. But you know, after this blizzard of speculation, of leaks, and all of this, the Russians have just gotten it. I mean, now the other shoe has to drop, everyone. I mean, these people, after a hard week of diplomacy and negotiations, this thing hasn't even started.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. Um, and so, yeah, the Russians have just got it. We got the 19 points. And then I'm not sure which day Witkoff is going to be there, but it's in a few days. Witkoff does have good relations with Putin. I mean, you could just see that they do seem to get on rather well. Um, but the key is, if Witkoff is going to be there, if Kushner will be there, Trump has left that open whether Kushner will be there, then you kind of, Rubio is being sidelined. I mean, so Politico kind of say, well, what do you mean? We talked to Rubio. Rubio is he's the one who's supposed to be, he's the one who matters. No, no, no. It's the president who matters. Doesn't matter
Well,
your Secretary of State.
what we might find out, and my gut is telling me this, Rubio was sent to babysit.
That's what it sounds like.
That's
That's
what it sounds like.
that's what it sounds like. They
And
got,
this is not his file.
yeah,
This is not his file.
exactly. He went there to, so he talked to the Ukrainians. And the Europeans, they were all very anguished. Merz puts in this phone call late Friday night. Well, I mean, still late Friday night, German time, not late, but he puts in this call, and Trump says, well, he's very anguished. This Merz seems very, very unhappy. All right, well, we'll keep him happy. Okay, well, Rubio will talk to your guys on Sunday. Is that all right? Oh yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, that. All right, fine. That keeps him happy. Rubio will talk to his guys. But that's the point. That they got very anxious. Trump kind of fobbed them off and saying, okay, talk to Rubio. But fundamentally, it doesn't look at this stage that there've been any major changes from that plan. I mean, you're right. They probably just whittled down. They removed things like the G8, which is quite pointless, as Russia's not interested, and no one in the G7 wants Russia there. So, I mean, what's the point of it? It's just taking up room. So,
And everything, look, part of the blizzard of nonsense that we saw over the week with these leaked conversations, okay? and particularly the one among the Russian, well, I think with Witkov, I mean, that is again a huge breach of security
Right.
and privacy.
Correct.
That was leaked, but you don't
Yep.
have the 19 points for us? Come
Right.
on.
It's a very good
Come
point.
on, everyone.
Right. Right.
I wonder if there'll be any follow-up on that because it was a completely innocuous conversation George and I went through it word for word. I mean, completely
Exactly.
innocuous. But the fact that it was leaked, that is the story, not the content of the conversation.
Exactly. That's the point. And why was it leaked? The leak was it was an attempt to discredit the negotiations. I mean, it was an
Exactly.
attempt to suggest that somehow, what like as with Russiagate, Trump is being run by the Kremlin. I mean, that was it. This is obviously that was the goal in order to sabotage any
But
negotiation.
see, again, but it's only but that theory of the case is only believable if you already
Yeah.
believe it.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's it. I mean, this is playing to the chorus,
Right.
your chorus, all the
Right.
time. George and I took playing, and it's like, huh?
There was nothing there.
Huh?
Nothing at all. Um, and of course the whole thing was very tendentiously leaked because they just simply we don't actually hear the audio. I mean this is basically they just gave us a transcript, so we never actually heard the audio. So we have to take Bloomberg's account. I don't know whether Bloomberg has heard the audio. Or we have to take then the NSA or whoever the NSA leakers account that this is an accurate transcript. But what we got, and I'm assuming that's the best they've got, is extremely innocuous.
That's such a good point. That's the best one. That's your best case.
Right,
That's your best evidence. Really?
right, right. Exactly.
Okay. The Well, we're going to go through another week of this, I guess. Okay. I don't know. My mood swings on this is just really incredible. Okay. I was hoping had gone over the hump of it all, but it just shows to what degree and how much effort these people will
Right,
go to keep this conflict going.
right,
Okay.
right.
I mean, again, this is a new low for not a new one, but a repeated blow. Somebody in the NSA is. Do they have a dog in this game? Really? That's bad news,
Yes,
everyone.
yes,
That's
yes.
bad news.
Very bad news. But it's all a piece of what was going on during Trump's um, first term, because clearly they were leaking things with a view to showing that somehow Trump is working for the Russians. That means you somehow there is what is called the deep state. You have clearly a vested interest in keeping this war going. And that may yet succeed. I mean, it's
Yes,
look,
absolutely,
after
absolutely.
all, Russiagate was not a failure. I mean, they didn't prove their case, but to the extent that they managed to blow Trump off course
Yep.
during his first term, Russiagate
And their
succeeded.
ability to continue to tap into it shows its success.
Yeah, yeah. And that's all. That's in politics. That counts as success. We achieved our political goals. Doesn't mean we were telling the truth. Who cares
Yeah,
about the truth? But we
who cares?
achieved our political goals.
Absolutely. All right, buckle up and brace for impact, everyone, because there is a political storm brewing in the upper echelons of the national security state because is Marco Rubio just a flat out liar? Well, of course he is, but will he be shown to be?
Right.
Okay. And
Yeah.
that will be, and I don't know, my gut tells me that Trump feels very comfortable. The fact that he's sending Witkoff says he's comfortable with him. Okay.
Yeah.
Jared Kushner always seems to get his grubby hands onto
Right.
things. All right. He's gonna rely upon those guys. Marco Rubio and Donald Trump are from different
Very
anthills.
different. They're very different. They were never close. They obviously had a very bitter election fight in 2016, so that which was quite acrimonious. And then somewhat surprising. Rubio managed to worm his way into Trump's good graces, and there was talk that maybe he will be Trump's VP. He was on the short list for VP, and then he got the Secretary of State position. So, but there's never been any particular closeness or meeting ground between them. So I guess Trump, thinks of Secretary of State position as somebody has to look the part. You have a nicely
That's such an
tailored suit.
interesting observation. That's such
Yeah,
a
you
good
kind of look,
observation.
you kind of
Yeah.
look good. That's what Secretary of State is supposed to do that. We wear nice suits, your hair always perfectly coiffed and then you look the
Yeah,
part.
he's got the teeth. He's got the
He's
teeth
got the
too.
teeth, exactly. He's good looking. He's a very smooth talker, very smooth operator. And I think Trump, that's the person. I mean, apparently he was seriously thinking about hiring Mitt Romney for, I don't know, for 2 or 3 days. And the guy's
Yeah.
Mitt Romney, awful person he is. He does look the part. I mean, he's a sort of,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, he's that, that the old patrician.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. There's sort of Bill Rogers with Nixon, Cyrus Vance had that look, very, yeah, patrician, the sort of, handsome, aging, but handsome and aging,
James
like
Baker also.
James
Yeah.
Baker, exactly. It was sort of, also beautifully tailored suits, and always looked the part you know, impeccable. Like James Baker. Can't conceive of Baker ever being unpunctual. You always say this.
Right.
This is a guy who's always punctual. It's like, and that's part of the persona. So I think Trump was picked one sought to hire as Secretary of State who looks the part. Even Rex Tillerson. Remember Rex Tillerson? He looked the part, even though his background was in ExxonMobil, but he did look the part as Secretary of State.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the enduring questions that we have is what did Trump learn from his first term? Because you bring these vipers close to you. Now, maybe it's better to keep your enemies close. Okay,
Right.
that's one theory of the case. Okay, but Driscoll, this new guy, the Army Secretary, JD's been sidelined over the last few news cycles, and that's not good. That's
No.
not good. Okay,
Right.
because we're going to see an interesting battle with the old establishment and whatever's going on in MAGA. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be ugly. I mean, considering the level of discourse that we've had to deal with, shut up, Piggy. Okay.
That's
I
right.
mean, this is going to be rolled up the sleeves. It's going to be very,
It's
very
gonna it's gonna be exactly it's gonna be very, very interesting because in a way I think this has to be the last chance for any kind of a deal. I mean, I think because if
oh
this
yeah.
fails,
Okay, well, I'm glad, George. That's the way we should end this here. The Russians will say no. Let's game on. Let's keep going.
that's gonna be
See,
good. Yeah,
that's not talked about enough.
right, right,
Okay, because the Russian position is yes, if you have something, present it to us, and we'll talk to you about it.
right.
But it doesn't mean we're going to agree. See,
Yeah,
this is this kind of mindset that the Russians have to agree, or they
yeah.
must because we say it, and the Russians have made it very clear. But if we don't like it, we'll tell you.
We'll continue with the war. The reason I'm thinking that it's the last chance because this would be number three for Trump. We had Anchorage, and then that fell through after that procession to Washington. Then we had the Trump's kind of announcement of the Budapest summit, and we thought, okay, well, this sounds promising. They're going to meet in Budapest. Orban will be there as the host and everything, so that looked promising, and that fell through within days. So this is number three, and if this falls through, I just don't see a number four. It's like because why go through all this again? So I would think this has to be the last chance for any kind of a deal.
I'm not optimistic, but as George and I have said repeatedly, this is the only deal in town, so we got to work with it. Okay,
Yeah,
I can't. Oh, I can never abandon hope. It's just part of my DNA. It's my nature.
right.
But hope, is your last refuge,
Yeah,
and I think we're pretty close to
yeah,
that right now.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly.
But who knows? By the time George and I reconvene on Sunday, We could
Well,
be,
I think we'll
he
have
might say it's a whole new ball
the whole
game.
new ballgame. We might hear more about the 19-point plan, or we'll hear about the when is Witkoff scheduled to go to Moscow. So there's the developments, but um, at the moment, I mean, part of it is the problem is there is the Thanksgiving thing. So it's like everything is a little slow in Washington with developments, even in Trump time. That it's a little slow. But by Sunday, there might be, by Sunday we're already thinking about next week, so there might be some developments by then.
And you know where to come to get those
Exactly,
developments. All
exactly.
right, everybody, this is a Goggle with Peter and George. This is Friday. George and I will reconvene on Sunday evening, my time. We have our live stream on Monday, 10 o'clock Eastern time, as usual. Um, uh, but as usual, George did his work here. He did his slides, okay? And you hear that? That's Buddy.
That's about it.
I know a little. I know a smattering of Chihuahua, but
Yes.
he's saying something about the tip jar.
Tip jar, exactly. The way he usually frames it is like what part of tip jar is unclear. There's a jar and you put tips in. I mean, how hard is that to understand? And he always explains himself in a very blunt way. So if you have anything at all, any extra cash, that you have no real use for, straight into that tip jar. It has to move in the direction that Buddy likes it to move. It has to be moving up, north. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and above all, you know, this Thanksgiving weekend, it's exhausting, Buddy. He needs something to energize him. The tip jar that might do the job. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.